It's been said that every quilt tells a story, and it's so true. But I also believe every quilter has a story to tell. I wanted to hear about the people behind these wonderful quilts and thought you'd enjoy hearing about their lives also. Welcome to A Quilter's Life. Eva Saunders, also known as the Gingerly Quilter, has come a long way literally. She was born and raised in Germany and found her way to Los Angeles, California, in the United States for school. Later, she moved to the eastern side of the United States, where she is excited to have launched Gingerly Quilt Co. If you're looking at quilts on Instagram, you've probably already seen her cool exploding pizza quilt pattern. Eva, thank you for joining us on A Quilter's Life.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
We met a couple weeks ago on Clubhouse Quilty Biz Chat that Carolina Moore has.
Yeah, it was so fun to be welcomed into the group. I was like the new one, but you made me feel really comfortable. And I was really happy that you offered to have me on the podcast.
It's a great group. I really look forward to chatting with them every week. And I have seen so many quilty business people get on there and be helped by Carolina and the other ladies that are there.
Yeah, they're so helpful. I've already gotten so much help as well with my small business. It's really nice.
Great. Let's jump back to, where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Germany, born near Frankfurt and raised near Munich. And I decided I want to study film after high school. So I made my way to Los Angeles to film school. And I stayed for love because I met my husband there. And now I live in the U.S. and I'm a dual citizen.
Oh, wow. So German was your first language?
Yes, English is my second language, believe it or not.
I am just amazed. I don't hear the accent that I would expect.
Well, when I was a little kid, my dad traveled a lot with his job and he traveled a lot to America. So he always brought me computer games from the US, like Disney games. And I heard a lot of the language and I always was so fascinated by the different sounds and tried to mimic them and heard a lot of the English. And I think that helped because I was very young then.
I'm assuming you speak German fluently.
Yeah, my parents are German. Everybody in my family is German. They still live there. I became a dual citizen after I got married to my husband, who's American.
Oh, cool. Could you do me a favor and say A Quilter's Life in German?
Das Leben eines Quilters.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Eva, share a special childhood memory.
Well, whenever I think of like the most special memories, and you said it doesn't have to be quilting related, but one of my really favorite childhood memories is with my German grandma because she was a seamstress. And I think the first couple times I spent summers with her when my parents went on vacation or just wanted, to have some time for themselves, I went to go see my grandma who lived a little further away. So I only saw her then. And she had this huge garden that we harvested together in the summer. We made jam, we cooked together, we made food together. And then since she's a seamstress, she had clients coming in. And I watched her, hem pans and sew curtains. And I think the earliest memory I have of that is her giving me her button tin and me just going through that tin with my hands and feeling, it's just a funny feeling. And I tried to sew on the buttons. She gave me needle and thread, and I couldn't get it through my head that the knots you make can still fit through the holes that you go through the fabric first when you sew them on. I might have spent like an hour trying to make a knot big enough to not go through the buttonholes. And it was so frustrating. I was maybe 3 or 4 years old until I realized, whoa, you can go to the fabric first and it'll magically work. I still remember that. That's my earliest memory with her. And also my most favorite because I learned something.
I'm trying to picture how big that knot was in your little
I made
hands.
several. I tried several times and it just wouldn't work because it was a big button I chose.
Oh, how cute. Now, other than quilting, did you have employment?
Well, I came to the US to study film. I had also studied design back in Munich. So I did a lot of photography, design, content creation jobs. I worked for BuzzFeed. I don't know if you remember in like 2015, 16 on Facebook, they had these cooking videos. It's like sped up top to bottom cooking videos. And I worked for them making those because I love cooking, as you know, I've learned some from my grandma, some from my parents. And I filmed cooking videos for them and they went super viral. I was in charge of German stuff. So that was really cool. And yeah, just generally in like visual arts, one way or another, I've been working.
So you came to the U.S. for school in that area. How long did the school take?
When I moved to Los Angeles for the American Film Institute Conservatory, it's one of the best quote unquote film schools in the US. Supposedly, it's very rough. It's brutal. It's like work every day, help other people with their shoots, make 3 films in the first year. It was very demanding. So I did that for 1 year on a scholarship. And then I switched gears to go to UCLA Extension, which is more of a self-paced film class where you have school in the evenings and you can have a job during the daytime, which I wasn't allowed to as a student from abroad, but I had like a lot of time developing projects and working on projects and doing that. And I preferred that to the like breakneck pace of the big film school. So all in all, I think that was maybe 2.5 years. And after that, I had the BuzzFeed job, which was like a post study employment kind of thing where I got my visa extended. So all in all, maybe 3.5 years.
Wow. Sounds intense.
It was. It was so much more intense than studying photography and design in Germany, which was like, I don't know, we had maybe 10 or 20 hours of class and the rest was all photo shoots and like leisure time, you know, like you need a little bit of leisure time to be creative. And that was kind of hard at the first film school to have any kind of creative headspace.
Yeah. So where are you living now and how did you end up there?
I live in Virginia right now. My husband's family lives here. And during the pandemic, we wanted to be closer to family. LA wasn't really giving us a lot of benefit and was really expensive to live. So we decided to move closer to family. The climate in Virginia is much closer to that, which I grew up with in Bavaria. And LA was just too hot for me. I very much enjoy it here. It's a university town I live in, so we have a vibrant arts community. And I don't really miss anything from LA right now. I'm really happy in Virginia.
Is there anything else about your family you would like to share?
Yeah, my parents have always been super supportive of any and all of my creative endeavors. So I'm really privileged and happy that they were able to support me that way and that I have been able to develop my creative talents, so to speak. Yeah, it's just nice to have support. It's going to be really hard to be creative if somebody just tells you to get a real job, you know? My parents always liked that I have a plan A and plan B and plan C because creative endeavors don't always work out on a straight line. But since I've done photography and design and film, I have a wide variety of things I can do. I freelance as a graphic designer often if other stuff is slow. And I also love teaching. So that's always something you can do to inspire other people and give them the spark of creativity, which I enjoy.
Mm-hmm. If you could have the chance to tell your great-great-grandchildren something about yourself, how would you describe yourself to them?
I try to be kind, loving, and honest in how I show up for the world, whether it's with family or friends or strangers or students, because I think kindness goes a long way and opens the way for connection with people. And that's how I want to be perceived and remembered.
And then what would you want to say to them?
Well, my great grandchildren, I wonder if in the future everything's replaced by AI and automation and all of that. I imagine. I think I would tell them, despite all that, to create their own unique art and to empower them to express themselves, because just something can be automated or created for you to consume doesn't mean it's going to give you the same cathartic experience or grounding experience. So I found for my life it to be very important to have something that grounds you, like a hobby, or, for me, it's sewing. Yeah, and I would hate for them to lose out on that because of artificial intelligence and all that, what we're getting into now. That's kind of scary.
Scary and exciting.
Yeah. More scary for me as a visual artist who makes their living off of that.
That's true. Yeah. Are there other crafts that you do or have done besides quilting?
I did a little bit of drawing and painting in college while I was studying design, but it didn't really stick. As a kid, I did, all the crafts possible, tried all kinds of different ones, but nothing quite stuck like the sewing. So I would say sewing and quilting would be the main craft, and sewing also because I'm petite and most of the clothes I buy don't fit me. So all through college and also sometimes now, I have to hem pants and adjust tops and things to fit me. So sewing never really faded away because I always needed it. And I think if you stick with something for a longer time, it makes for a better hobby because you get better at it.
So true. Are there other hobbies that you do?
I do like to cook and bake. That's something I enjoy. I bake bread for myself once a week at least. And, I like making pies and cakes and cooking for family, like making pizzas. We have a pizza party every couple of weeks where I make the dough and then everybody can just put on whatever they want on their pizzas. And for me, it beats the restaurant pizza experience. I've kind of over time perfected my pizza recipe, and family always loves coming for pizza parties. So I enjoy that very much.
Oh, what a fun time. Now I'm hungry for pizza. Do you think any of your hobbies show up in your quilting?
Definitely. We just talked about pizza. My first quilting pattern was called Exploding Pizza. So I love just taking this baking hobby and pizza enthusiasm and put it into a quilt.
So who introduced you to quilting?
My grandma introduced me to quilting. She was a seamstress, and then in 1998, maybe, I think, she started quilting and got fancy quilting magazines. I think I remember she always said the American ones are the best ones because the trend kind of swapped over into Germany, but it wasn't as big there. There aren't as many quilters. It's not as rooted in culture. And I remember her doing a lot of colorful, maybe a little bit more modern quilts, even though, now we perceive modern quilts as something a little bit different. But back then in 1998, her quilts were always very, very colorful, bright colors, what I would still consider modern already. And I did it with her. She taught me how to do it, every year in the summer. when we spent time. Either she came over or I went over to her place for 2 weeks or so. I wouldn't let her do anything else. It was like, Grandma, we need to sew. She was like, let's take a walk. I'm like, no, Grandma, we need to sew. So we made little wall hangings, pillows. We did one bed cover that wasn't completely quilted because can't really do all that in 2 weeks. But yeah, I loved quilting with her and hand quilting the little wall hangings. Something I still enjoy from time to time, hand quilting and hand binding.
It must have been so hard to come clear over to the United States. Do you get to go back very often to see your family?
I try to go about once a year to see them. Nowadays, we have Skype and WhatsApp and, all these things to stay in touch. I FaceTime with them once a month. I don't know if I lived in Germany and had moved to a different city, maybe I wouldn't even have had that much contact with them, because now that I'm so far away, you have to stay in contact because they can't just come over. So I feel like I have more contact with them that way.
Yeah.
It's only a bummer when there's like big birthdays or unfortunate events where you want to be close to them and you can't just like fly out every time. But I was able to go to my grandma's funeral last year. I was very happy I could do that and go through all her quilts and see her life's work and how much of an artist she was and her kind of oeuvre of quilts she made that she hadn't sold, because she did quilt shows and exhibitions too. But yeah, sometimes it's unfortunate if you're far away from family. That's true.
Yeah, I forget sometimes how much access we have worldwide now. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. The world has come closer. And my grandma, I think one of the last times I spoke to her, I used to call her for her birthday every year. And she said, well, next time you're in Germany, I'll just hop in your luggage and I'll come with you to LA. Because she's very small and tiny, just like me. And I love that she was joking about that.
Oh, how fun. Whether it's a quilt you made or a quilt someone else made, do you have a favorite quilt?
This one's so hard because I love all my babies, like the quilt patterns I make and the quilts I make. But there was one specifically I love the most, and it doesn't have a complicated pattern or anything. It's a puff quilt. And I had never seen a puff quilt before, but lo and behold, Stitchery, they have this online quilt along of the ombre puff quilt. And last year I quilted along. It was a lot of work, but it's the most cozy and warm and snuggly quilt I've made to date. And I really love it. Whenever I need some comforting, I wrap myself in that and I'm happy. So that must be my favorite quilt.
Interesting. I always wondered on those puff quilts, since there's, I guess I'll call them valleys, between the puffs, does crud get stuck in there? Are they easy to wash?
I actually haven't needed to wash mine yet. Nothing that I can tell got stuck in there. The crevices aren't very deep, so I haven't had a problem. And we have a cat, even with him around, and he likes to sleep in it too. We like to put it in a chair, fold it, so when he gets cold, he can jump in and be warm between the layers. I put flannel on the back, so that kind of is nice and cozy. But I haven't had trouble cleaning it. It's huge, though. I made it extra large so that me and my husband can both sit under it, because if I pull it up, he'll want to be under it too. And it probably fits in our washing machine. I'm not sure. It's very puffy, so we haven't tried that yet.
I haven't actually seen one in person. I've just seen pictures. So I was just wondering how all that was. We have so many tools to use now. Do you have a favorite tool?
I have a new favorite tool, which for the longest time I didn't know how to use or didn't think I needed. And that's a stiletto. And I don't mean the shoe. For those of you who've never seen a stiletto, it has a wood handle, at least mine does, and a kind of pokey end on the other side, kind of like an awl or a very thick needle at the end. And it helps you grip fabric. Like when you're sewing, you need to hold the little ends so that you don't have to put your finger close to the needle trying to hold little pieces of fabric. And I didn't see a use for it before, but when I was at QuiltCon this year, I saw this really pretty one that was made of like yellow, orange, and red wood, like kind of marble. It was just so pretty. I had to have one. And it's a seam ripper and stiletto. I mainly bought it for the seam ripper, but lo and behold, I'm mainly using it for the stiletto part. I've recently worked on more art quilting, and for that, it's been indispensable to save my hands and to be more accurate. So I'm looking forward to doing more piecing projects where I may grab it and use it too. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, sometimes we don't know what we need until we get to use it.
That's very true.
Well, some people like every step, and some people like a particular step of the quilting process. Do you have a particular step?
I might be in the minority here, but I love binding. I love sewing the binding on the back of a quilt, something a lot of people like to skip. Sometimes I'll machine bind if I have to finish something quickly for a deadline or I want extra straight edges. But I usually really like hand binding. Hand quilting, I think, would be too much of a time commitment for me. So hand binding is the perfect balance between I'm doing something with my hands and it's done in 3 days. And I would call myself a finisher. I really enjoy finishing projects. Of course, I also like starting new projects, but the finishing stage is what I love the most. And sitting under a finished quilt where you can appreciate it and look at every inch of the quilt while you're binding it on and while you're cozy and warm under it is my favorite thing.
Yeah, I was noticing this last winter how I was enjoying that so much more of having that quilt on me while I worked on it.
Yeah. And the puff quilt, I spent 2 months. That one I had to hand quilt. You basically make a little cross on all the intersections because it won't fit under the machine foot to be quilted if it's puffy. And I just put on a TV show every night and sat under that huge, warm, snuggly quilt and hand quilted. And it was the best thing.
No wonder you love it so much. I've also found that there's kind of 2 camps. There's one camp where people have multiple projects going at once, and the other camp needs to finish a project before starting another. Which camp are you in?
I'm in the first camp. I always have several projects in different stages because sometimes the repetitive nature of some steps can make me bored. So I like to have different stages so that I can piece for a little bit for an hour or 2 and then go to the other project and maybe cut something or bind the quilt at the end of the day when I'm tired. So I like to have several projects, not too many. Like I don't like when I have a huge stacks and I feel like I can't finish them. I'd like 2 or 3 at a time, maybe. Some of them may be smaller projects or tests or new patterns. And I also like having a deadline where I have to finish something that really helps me finish stuff too. So like 2 or 3 at a time, maybe.
Oh, cool. Share your worst quilting experience.
The first quilt I made on my own without my grandma was when, after the pandemic, when I had made masks, I had so many fabrics left over because people in my neighborhood had donated old bed sheets for me to be used for masks. I had so much stuff and we were moving to Virginia. So I was like, well, let me see what of these I can use and make a quilt out of. And we were going to buy our first house in Virginia. So I wanted to make a snuggly quilt for our first home. So it had to be big enough for our bed and even a little bit bigger. So I made like an oversized queen. And I used high loft batting because I wanted it to be like a comforter. But what I didn't realize is that I only had like a, 4-inch harp space on my little sewing machine. And quilting it was really hard. Piecing was fine, but quilting with the high loft batting was a true workout. And I didn't even quilt very densely because that wouldn't have been possible. And my first time actually trying straight line quilting, because with my grandma, it was all small wall hangings quilted by hand. I had never quilted with the machine. I really learned how to quilt on the machine with that one. I have photos of where you can see how much like stuffed in there it is. And that was not a fun experience for quilting. Eventually I bought a bigger machine and now I'm only doing throw size at the max. And that's been a better experience. You live, you learn.
Yeah. I think we all have to go through shoving a quilt through that small space.
It's like an initiating experience.
Oh, it's rough. What has drawn you to continue making quilts rather than do anything else that you could with your time?
I really like the tactile sensation of fabric and working with fabric. And I like that it's repetitive, but also versatile. So you have so many stages of quilting where you do different things like ironing, cutting, binding, piecing. They're all different, but it's repetitive enough that you can sit down for a little while and just forget everything and get into the flow. Artists call it flow, when you just forget everything around you and you forget time. That's really the goal for every artist, to get into that like very flowy experience where you're just doing and you're not thinking about it and it just flows. So I really get that with quilting. I didn't get it with paint and drawing and other things as much because I think I was missing the like tactile feedback when you touch fabric and work with fabric, and also the versatility of different steps and things. And then also partly the analytic part of my brain that's like, I have an idea for a quilt. Let me figure out how to do it and how to write a pattern, that it's kind of like a puzzle on some days. And then on some days I just buy a pattern and I go step by step and I don't have to think about it. Somebody tells me how to do it. So all of those things together have kept my interest. It's really hard to get bored with quilting, I would say.
Yeah, and there are so many different ways to quilt. It's amazing, really.
Yeah. I've noticed with my pattern writing, because I've only started quilting again for the last 2 or 3 years, and I had to learn a lot of techniques on my own because it's been like, 15, 20 years since I last did it. And I make a pattern with one technique, and then I write a pattern with that technique. And then I move into the next technique to learn and then to make something with myself. And so I just kind of move through all kinds of different ones. The patterns I have made so far have all had different techniques because I don't want to spend too long with the same one because then I'll get bored.
And who do you make your quilts for?
It depends. The patterns I make for other people to enjoy and one for myself to enjoy. I only really design things that I'm also going to enjoy making. That's a little not super selfless. Well, the first kind of year I got back into quilting, I made quilts for everybody else because I was like, let me set up my friends and family this year. And then after that, I can write patterns, do my own stuff. And nobody's going to bug me about like, hey, can I have a quilt too? I think I've made 3 for my husband so far because every year he's like, hey, can I have a quilt for this? Or, a mug rug or a wall hanging. So I make stuff for him a lot because he sees all the cool projects I'm doing. But I set up my parents with quilts for retirement, and when I visit my friends in Germany, I bring them something. But right now, it's mostly for me, whatever tickles me, and samples for patterns. And then if I see a really cool pattern by someone else, I'll do like 1 or 2 of those per year for myself if it fits with our decor at home and we just need another quilt for a couch or a wall hanging or something special.
Boy, it sounds like you make a lot of quilts. Do you know how many you make in a year?
I don't make a lot of big ones. I make like 2 to 3 big ones maybe. And I do quilt them myself. I've never had anything long-armed. Maybe I will in the future. But for me, the quilting is kind of part of the art. So I always hesitate to give that away to someone else unless there's like the perfect panto. But yeah, maybe 3, 4 big ones a year and then lots of small ones because I have to make samples for patterns I write. I do like 2 to 3 patterns a year. And yeah, lots of small stuff. And I do keep a little book after every year. I pick out photos of all the projects I've done in a year and I put them in a little printed book so I can remember what I've done. Because I'm always like, oh, I'm not really making that much. And then I look through that book and it's like 20 pages. And I'm like, okay, I do a lot. A little bit here, a little bit over there. You tend to forget what you've done. So that's nice.
What a cool idea to make those books every year.
Yeah, it's so easy to forget what you've made, what you've done. And I make a point of always reminding myself how far I've come, how my craft has developed. And that goes for art stuff too. Like with my film stuff, I always try to do that. Look at my old works again over time, appreciate what I've done. Because it's so easy to forget. And I do sometimes get imposter syndrome. And those times I go back and I look at these books and all the stuff I've done and enjoyed. And that helps a lot.
I bet that also helps you see how much you've grown.
Yes. The growing part is otherwise really hard to see if you're in it. If you see a whole year in one little book, you can really see growth.
What are you working on right now?
Right now, I'm working on integrating quilting more into my life. And I decided to do more teaching. I just got a business grant from my local small business development center. I did a pitch competition and business plan for an expansion of my quilting business that will be teaching online classes. So that's what I'm working on right now, and I'm very excited about it.
That is an exciting next step. Wow.
And it will be centered on art quilting. So I'm working on teaching a combination of art classes and quilt classes. So the class will be both an art class and a quilting class together.
That seems something that's really needed at this point in time. So that will be really nice.
Why do you say that?
It just seems like I'm hearing more and more about art quilting. So I'm assuming with as large as the quilt industry has grown over the last couple of years, there's going to be a lot of people wanting to move in that direction.
Oh, interesting. I did notice at QuiltCon, there was a lecture, Quilters as Artists, and there were like 200 or 300 people in that lecture. So that told me, okay, there are a lot of people interested in learning about art. And since I have that background in photography and design and a lot of art education, I felt like it could be good to bridge that gap, give people a little more vocabulary on how to talk about art. Because I think every quilter is an artist in a way. You don't have to create a totally unique, new, groundbreaking work for your quilt to be considered art. I think every quilter is an artist because you choose colors, you choose patterns. Even if somebody else tells you how to put it together, I think there's still an aspect of art in quilting. But for those quilters who want to challenge themselves and want to go beyond just making patterns, I think these courses will be really helpful and really freeing.
Yeah, they will be. Share a quilting tip.
So there's this thing that I didn't realize a lot of people don't know. I didn't know it when I went back into quilting. And that is that threads are wound in different ways. There are two different kinds of how threads are wound. And that is because in the last 20 years or so, fabric manufacturers changed how they wind their thread. So since I learned from my grandma, she never learned about this because it just changed while she was already doing what she knew how to do. So there's stack wound thread and cross wound thread. And each of them requires a different pin to be used. The stack wound thread goes on a vertical pin, and the cross wound thread goes on a horizontal pin. And that kind of influences how much your thread gets twisted. If you put it on the wrong pin, it'll get too twisted and your thread will rip. So I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, my machine doesn't like this type of thread. And really what's happening is that the thread is on the wrong pin. That's something I found when I was rehabbing vintage machines and learning a lot about how sewing machines work. And those older machines have the vertical pins only versus newer machines have both. So that's like a big thing for me. Now I can use any thread I want with any machine I want, or with adapters for the vintage machines. If you use a thread cone holder, you can use the cross-wound thread too. It's just made my quilting so much easier because my thread isn't constantly ripping. And it just opens up so many more threads to use, and it's been making my quilting experience much easier.
Well, I had heard a little bit about that, but not to that extent. That's so interesting. When you buy the thread, is it marked which kind of thread that is?
No, you can clearly see it. So stack wound thread is the thread that's just wound. If you imagine a stack of pancakes, that's what it looks like. And cross wound thread is more like shoelaces, where you can see like an X or V shape made by the thread. Most modern thread is cross wound, like Orifil is cross wound, Gutaman is cross wound. The only stack wound ones I've seen, I think, are the Coates and Clark. They're sometimes stack wound, like the cheapest thread on the line. Or sometimes you go to Joann's or something and they have a bin of cheap thread that's usually stack wound. And one other big difference is also that stack wound thread you just put on the pin and it moves as the thread unspools, right? And the cross wound thread is not supposed to be moving. It's supposed to be secured by those little plastic thingies you can put on the pin that I never knew what to do with when I started. So it's actually not moving and only the thread is unspooling. So that's another big thing that's different. That'll help you a lot with thread ripping if you ever have that problem.
Well, there's a certain thread that I couldn't use on one of my machines, and now I'm anxious to go try the other way.
Yeah. I made a post about it recently and it just like blew up and so many people shared it. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's something people didn't know. And I've told people in my guild about this too, who have been sewing for over 20 years, and they didn't want to believe me. They were like, no, I don't think my machine can have that thread. And I'm like, try it out. You'll see if it works or not. It doesn't hurt to try it out and see if that's the problem. I'm pretty sure it is because I have a collection of vintage machines now, and stack wound thread works with all of them, and Orifil thread works with the thread count. There shouldn't be a reason why it wouldn't work otherwise.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Describe how you went from having quilting as a hobby and you decided to make it a business.
It was kind of a slow process, I would say, because I got back into quilting after making masks. And there's something about quilting that just really relaxes and grounds me. And during the pandemic, in a time where everything's super uncertain, that really helped me. So I wanted to make quilting a larger part of my life. And because we moved from LA to Virginia and I didn't really have a job lined up yet. And I was able to do some freelance stuff on the side while I figure out what I really want to do. It kind of gave the chance for a new start, so to speak, moving cities. So I had started writing patterns already as like a side thing because I figured, hey, this is graphic design. I enjoy doing that. And I enjoy the puzzle pieces of making a pattern. And over the last year, I've become more confident in that and have enjoyed publishing patterns. But it's not really a business that's making a lot of profit because patterns take a lot of time to make and don't sell for very much money. And that's why I've decided to really think about what kind of business could this be. And that's why I did the business class and did get the startup funding to do the teaching, because I think that'll really be a cool way to spend my time that combines my filmmaking background, my graphic design abilities, and also my teaching abilities. Because during the pandemic, I was teaching German conversation courses for a college, and that was really fun. I learned a lot of basics of teaching online, and it's just the perfect combination for me of all the jobs I've worked before and all the things I've learned. And I'm really excited to make that more of a sustainable business in the future.
It's always an exciting time to start getting out there and doing what you love and seeing how everything you've done before comes together to do that.
Yeah, it's funny how that works sometimes. If you look back and take the time to look back and see what you're really good at versus what you think you want to do. With the filmmaking, especially, I went through that phase because I loved filmmaking, but I'm not a people person. And being on set, ordering people around, talking to actors, all of that was uncomfortable for me. So it took me a while to realize that that may not be the best way to express myself. And since I'm so visual and I had this skill of sewing and stuff, once I rekindled with that, it was just so clear that this is what it's got to be. And since I love teaching too, it's just got to be that. And I love inspiring people and connecting with people. I love to be heard. That's like my existential need, whether that's from making films or writing or making food videos to be shared by people, which was very exciting, or seeing students learn and get better at something, inspiring other people. That's just how I thrive. And I'm hoping that my quilting class will do that. It doesn't exist yet, so I have to kind of imagine what it'll be to keep me motivated, because right now I'm not getting the feedback yet, but I'm very excited to try it out.
Yeah. Share the name of your business and tell how you came up with the name.
My business is called Gingerly Quilt Co. And I called it Gingerly Quilt Co. because I'm a ginger, as in I have red hair. That's something people usually remember about me right away. And also because my personality is kind of gingerly, cautious, thinking a lot about things, and a little introverted. So the wordplay kind of worked out for me. So that's why I called it that. It's me in a nutshell.
Out of curiosity, are there other redheads in your family?
Not in my immediate family. That was kind of a surprise to my parents that I came out with red hair. On my mom's side, I have two second cousins who are bright red. But other than that, we don't have redheads in the family.
I was curious because my oldest is a redhead.
Oh, fun.
I didn't know until he might have even been out of college that redheads were called gingers.
Huh.
I don't know why I didn't know that.
Well, I only learned it when I came to the U.S., so in college. So I didn't know that before, too.
So you've been writing patterns. What was the first pattern you made?
My first pattern was the exploding pizza pattern. And there's a really funny story behind that.
Please share.
So when I got back into quilting, I was making a quilt for myself. And, I had the cutting mat and my rotary cutter and all. And my husband was watching me intently because it was still something like new and exciting. And he watched me. He's like, "What is that pizza cutter you have there?" And I said, "It's not a pizza cutter. It's a rotary cutter." But he didn't even listen anymore because in his head, the wheels were turning. And he went, "Can you make me a pizza quilt?" And I was like, "Sure, I guess I can make you a pizza quilt." So I looked at patterns online and I couldn't find any pizza pattern. There were like some maybe like applique or art quilts that were pizzas, but no like straightforward, easy pattern. So I looked at some other patterns online and one day it just hit me because I remembered the exploding heart quilt from Slice of Pie quilts. And I figured instead of a heart, I could just make it a round shape that looks like a pizza and then make the quadrants different flavors, like, quattro stazioni, what is it called? 4 seasons. So I made this mock-up quilt for my husband and drew it all on graph paper and all and made this pizza quilt and posted it online in a Facebook group. And people were like, "Are you going to make a pattern? Please make a pattern. We want the pizza quilt." And so I was like, okay, well, I'm a graphic designer. I guess I can write up a pattern. And that was how Gingerly Quilter was born. I needed to have a logo and business to sell the pattern. So I did that. And then on my husband's quilt, I hand quilted a little pizza cutter on the back of the quilt, like big stitch quilting, to commemorate how it all started, because it was just because of his pizza cutter comment that Gingerly Quilter happened.
I wanted to insert here that you had explained to us earlier about you did go to the lady that made the exploding heart pattern.
Yes, I asked before I published the pattern, I asked Slice of Pie Quilts if it would be okay if I basically modify her pattern. I wrote it all from scratch and in my own words, of course, but I asked her permission and she said, "I can't believe I didn't think of this because her company is literally called Slice of Pie." And she's like, "It's a pizza pie. How didn't I think of this?" So she loved the concept and was on board and said it's okay if I want to make my own version.
I love it that quilters work together so well.
Yeah, it was amazing. And it felt really good to be supported since it also was my first time trying that. And then a little bit later, so I did 2 more offshoot patterns. One was just a pizza slice because I'd already designed it. I figured, what else can we do with this pizza? So there's a back pattern and a decor pattern with like pillows, table runners, and that kind of thing. And after that, I did Amber from Alderwood Studios pattern writing course because I wanted to find out how I can streamline the pattern writing process a little bit because it took me a long time to do it, and how to simplify my patterns because the pizza pattern was very involved and I wanted to have some patterns that are a little more straightforward. So that really helped me make better patterns and get my business off the ground.
Amber's great. I got to interview her too.
Yeah, she's amazing. I feel so honored I got to write the blurb on her first book because she had reached out on social media like that she needed a copy editor. And I said, well, I have experience in proofreading and translation kind of stuff in screenwriting, so I can write you a blurb if you want and you can see if you like it. And she ended up really liking it. So that's what the book is summarized with on like Amazon and on the back of the book. And I was so proud that I got to write a blurb for like a big designer.
Oh, how cool. What fun. So do you remember when you put your pattern out there and that first person bought it?
I do remember. So on the day of the pattern release, I did like a live video to tell people about the pattern on Instagram. I didn't have a huge following yet, but I just thought it might be cool. And then I had like my Etsy app, my phone by me in case somebody buys the pattern, I would know. And when that first sale came through, I was so happy and felt so supported. I didn't sell a ton of patterns the first week, but those few first patterns really make me happy because every single person who's going to enjoy this pizza quilt, make it for somebody else for gifting or for themselves or whichever. I just want to make people happy, and every single person counts. So I had about 20 testers before who made the quilt, and it was really fun to see them make it and their versions. But then the extension of that is really selling it and getting it to more people who can enjoy it. And I really like that. So that gave me the motivation to keep going with it.
Isn't it an amazing feeling when you realize someone actually spent money on something that you love so much and that they love it that much too?
Yeah. I mean, the money's kind of just a bonus. It's really just the external validation. Somebody liked it enough to buy it, and somebody will enjoy it now. That makes me really happy. And, it's nice to be paid for it so that you can keep doing it.
Yeah. Eva, is there anything else you wanted to share today?
I guess the only thing else I have to share is stay tuned for the first art class. I'm still working on that, but I'm hoping it'll come out in the second half of the year. And I'm very excited to show you all what I have in store. I think it'll be really cool.
And share where we can find your business so that we can keep in touch and follow you.
Yeah, the best way to follow me is on Instagram, and my handle is Gingerly Quilt Co. Very easy. I'm on TikTok now too, so Gingerly Quilt Co. It's the same handle on TikTok if you prefer that platform. I share different things in each app most of the time because they work a little differently. There's a Facebook page, Gingerly Quilt Co. If you prefer Facebook. All my Instagram posts will be shared to Facebook if you want to know what's happening. And you can also sign up for my email list if you want to hear when new patterns come out or when the new class comes out. And if you go to Instagram in my profile, you can see the newsletter sign up, or you can go on my website, which is gingerlyquiltco.com. That one also has the newsletter sign up if you want to keep up to date.
Great. And then those links will also be on your episode page on A Quilter's Life.
Great.
Eva, thank you so much for sharing your story on A Quilter's Life.
Thank you. Well, it was great chatting with you. Have a good one. Goodbye.
You too. Bye-bye. You can find more stories on aquilterslife.com or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so each episode will be downloaded automatically. Also, I want to hear about you and your wonderful quilts. Please contact me, Paula Chamberlain, through the website to set up an interview. And as always, thanks for listening.